Ralph Offenhouse wants a copy of the Wall Street Journal. LQ Sonny Clemens just wants a martini straight up with olives. And Lieutenant Worf walks into a door. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk. Today we're doing a review of Star Trek The Next Generation Season 1, Episode 25, the final episode of the first season, entitled The Neutral Zone. Story by, this one's a little strange, Deborah McIntyre and Mona Clee. Teleplay by Maurice Hurley, and television story by Maurice Hurley. That's kind of a new one. This one is directed by, of course, James L. Conway, and we have a very special guest, legendary director, Mr. James L. Conway is joining us. Thank you so much for joining us, Jamie. So good to see you again.
Nice to be back.
Also, very special thanks to Grandpa One, aka Tim Baum, for sponsoring this entire first season. Thank you very much. This was May 14th, 1988. Where were you? So first things first, Jamie, I just got to know, this was the final episode of season 1. I'm assuming in production order, this was still the final episode. Do you remember, looking back 35 years, do you remember if there was a buzz? Was there some stress about maybe there won't be a second episode? Were people getting senioritis? What was the feel at that time?
It was a little complicated for a couple of reasons. One, there was another writer's strike. There was a writer's strike on when we made this episode. And it started shortly about the time I was doing prep, so that I never had any rewrites on the script we got. There was some production. I don't know who made them, but on a show that had rewrites and rewrites and rewrites all the time, this one did not. The script we got handed was pretty much the script we shot. So if there wasn't a writer's strike, I'm not sure what things would have been addressed or not.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. The crew's morale and the cast morale was great. It wasn't official that the show was getting picked up. Nobody knew for sure. The studio knew, but they hadn't shared it yet. I think they were sort of keeping things close to their chest, and they decided what to do about different contractual things that they had to deal with. But the actors didn't. But everybody was in pretty good spirits, tired. But overall, it was a fun shooting the show.
Wow, that answered a huge question that I had.
Totally.
Because not having rewrites, usually when they're watching the dailies and they're going to kind of tweak things to get more juice out of the story, maybe bring more drama to a scene, and it felt like this was like the first draft, or because for a final episode, this is a season finale. I was expecting, I guess, more action per se. I was expecting more action, maybe battle scene, or I was expecting more. And I guess you're handcuffed in this instance because you can't get anything more than whatever is handed to you at this time, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right. All they could do is, with production changes, and even those couldn't be made by Writers Guild members. And I'm a Writers Guild member, and I was back then, so I was very particular to make sure that it was adhered to. And watching it, I watched it again yesterday. The story of the three people that are rescued is pretty much, each has their own arc, and each is kind of nice. That all worked all right, but the whole Romulan story was like a non-starter. You had all this build up, and then it just was a big tease about what might come, but there was no conflict when there could have been. There could have been a lot more to milk there. It was interesting how it was all just sort of fizzled out at the end.
It's funny you say that. That's exactly what I was thinking when watching it was, hey, this is the Romulans we haven't seen in 50 years, they say. It's tense. They don't know what to do. They're a little worried. They're a little stressed. Is this aggressive? What's going on? How do we handle this? And then it was just kind of a few, it had a few good lines when they say, we are back. Okay, that's big. That's good. That sets up the second season. But it did feel slightly incomplete, whereas the three characters here seems like more of a standard Star Trek episode, where you learn about the characters of the week and they have their arcs, and they all had very different personalities. They all handled the situation differently. It was fun to follow and fun to watch, but that part seemed much more fleshed out. It seemed like they really worked that out completely. I wonder if the Romulan thing could have just been a different episode.
Well, they was setting up something for season 2 because, and I don't remember exactly. I'm sure it was dealt with at the beginning of season 2. I don't remember, but it in the balance, it seems like the three people stories should have been the subplot.
Yeah.
One of three plots, the Romulans being the A plot, and then some personal character crew member story for the B plot. And there was nothing with the characters at all in this with our regulars. It was just those three and the Romulans sort of as an afterthought.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote the same thing in my notes. Because of the way the Romulan situation turned out, it seemed to be two B plots instead of an A plot and a B plot. This episode felt like I was watching two B plots, and I was waiting for, some climax, some action, something bigger than what I got, and that's why I felt let down on both plots. Essentially, they had great story ideas, though. They, the coming up, talking about cryogenics, for example, and talking about the Romulans, another thing that we want to talk about. Like, those things are interesting for me as a viewer, but just not the way it was approached in this particular script.
And something that occurred to me when I watched it yesterday was the idea of the cryogenics, and that you die and you go to sleep, and now you're suddenly brought back to life 300 years later. You never really think about the people who do that and what would happen if they got brought back. So there was a lot to really dig into there. I wasn't sure they really got into the whole, what do you mean I'm alive in 300 years? And because nobody knew back then in 1988 how visual the internet would be and how visual our world would be. The computers were so primitive that they used, and they talked to the computer, and you only went to the screen once for that weird picture of her grandson who looks just like her dad, or her great grandson looks like her husband. But these days, if we were making that show, it would all be screens. There'd be screens everywhere. There'd be all these incredibly advanced videos. But who knew that 35 years ago where we would be today?
Something I noticed straight away from the very beginning, I feel like it was the first minute, there was a moment, it was a camera shot, it's like a camera move. We're looking at the bridge, and Worf is in his new station, and Data is behind him. Data turns around to walk towards Worf to meet him at Tactical. And the camera, when Worf is first talking, the camera's like this. When Data stands next to him, the camera pulls in, and I think it was more than just closing in on him, but it felt like it actually moved forward. And I don't know if you remember that shot, and I was just kind of curious about if you were more of a stagnant camera shot kind of person, or if you like to, as a director, if you like to experiment with shots, or if this was just the DPs doing this and you say that looks great.
It would have been a dolly push in, and I was always my camera always moved when possible. In early days of Star Trek first season, it was more difficult because of the blue screens. The camera was bolted down. I mean, literally, it was a Mitchell, old-fashioned Mitchell with 3-pin pull down, and they had to put the tripod legs down and then attach them to the stage floor, trying to get rid of any vibration because the blue screen. And this was just, 1988 technology. I didn't come back again until season 5, I think, of Next Generation. By then it was much looser. Technology had improved a lot, but the camera moves were much more limited. Whenever you were on the bridge and there was a blue screen involved, you had strict rules you had to follow. So that might have been one of the reasons there was less there. And also those sets weren't as big as they got, and the equipment got smaller, so you could move around much easier as the years went by. But my personal style was to move the camera all the time, whenever possible.
Yeah, I had a similar question about just the framing of shots in the room where they were having the meeting. There was the space was being kind of flying by in the background, and then there was a solo shot of Picard where he just had space behind him, and I actually liked that shot. But my question about that shot is, I remember on Deep Space Nine we had that black velvet curtain that had the little tiny mirror dots on it.
Right.
And it really kind of just moved really slowly, or appeared to move slowly,
It
but
moved.
and it was the backdrop though, so
Yeah.
it wasn't like the warp speed backdrop which we had in this shot. And I wanted to ask you, was that a green screen shot that you used for that, or how did you guys do that?
Yes, that would have been a green screen, or I think it was a blue screen in the early days.
Okay.
But yes, it was a green screen out the window, and again, you had the camera had to be locked down. Now, I think all those visual effects were redone when they redid the
Oh,
episodes for DVD. That's why I think all of including those, I think were redone. I think the miniatures were redone because I know they redid special effects when they did some of the DVD reissues. And those
Mhm.
did not look like the original effects to me. I could be wrong, but I thought they looked a lot better than I thought they would have for 1988.
I thought so too, actually. I thought the way the lines were moving in the background seemed a little more modern than the time period.
you know what else looked
So
really modern too? Sorry, Cirroc, just real quick, was that opening scene, that opening shot of the floating little space station thing. I was like, every once in a while we get something in this first season of The Next Generation where I say, this does not look like 1988 or 1987. This looks like 2000 or 98 or 99. Like sometimes I'm kind of, and maybe I'm insulting the 80s, but when I think 80s, I think kind of crappy stuff, like visually, because technology's improved so much, and we're used to like these movies from the 80s where you're like, okay, that's fake. But every once in a while, like you see something in this first season where you're like, this looks really good. And so, Jamie, it might be, like you said, that it
Right.
kind of got remastered a little bit.
They remastered, and I think they actually redid a bunch of effects.
Hmm.
I know somebody I could ask to find out, but I think it did look, if it looked that good in 88, it was way ahead of its time.
Amazing. But anyway, sorry I interrupted you there, Cirroc. That's just something that really blew me away.
Yeah, do you recall the budget being bigger for this episode because it's a season finale, or was it just standard procedure for at this
It would
point?
be, there was no action. I mean, the reason that you had bigger budgets was because you had big fights or you went on location, or
Mhm.
not in this case. This was like essentially a bottle show. So no, there was
Yeah.
yeah, it was a regular 7-day show.
Now, something you mentioned a few minutes ago, Jamie. Sorry, I know we're hitting you with a lot of questions, but we have so many questions for you, especially because, as you mentioned, you pretty much, after these two episodes of The Next Generation, you kind of were away from Star Trek for about 5 years, right? You came back in '93 to do a Next Generation episode, as well as right around that same time frame, maybe a little bit later, a few months later, you did the season 1 Deep Space Nine episode Duet, which many people say is the best episode of season 1 by a long shot. What were you doing in that time? I do see that you worked a lot still on IMDb. You had a lot of work. And when you came back in '93, did it feel like, I'm back home? Or were there just so many changes that you didn't recognize it?
Well, besides being a director, I'm also a writer, and I left in 88. I was the supervising producer, head writer on a show called Paradise, which was a Western. Lee Horsley played a gunfighter who adopted 3 kids. That went for 3 seasons on CBS. So that was 3 seasons in a row, and that's all 9 months. That was a full-time job because I was writing it and producing it and directing it.
Wow.
And then from after that, I did a TV series. I was at Warner Brothers with the same producer called Bodies of Evidence for 2 seasons, and that actually was George Clooney starred in it. It was it's a funny story. The reason George Clooney is a star is because Les Moonves, who was the president of Warner Brothers at the time, believed in George and put him under a contract, a contract for the studio. And he kept putting him in things. He put him in our show, and then he put him in Sisters, and then finally he put him in ER, and he broke out on ER. So the reason, and George, when we done Bodies of Evidence, had been on like 15 failed pilots. So the reason that George finally had a chance to break out, and he's an incredible guy, I love him, and he was a wonderful guy to work with, was because Les believed in him, and then he finally broke out on ER. So anyway, I did those two shows, Paradise and Bodies of Evidence, and 5 years has gone by. And now I'm available again. I call Rick and I say, I'm available. I'd love to come back to Star Trek. And he says, great. He called me back the next day. I had my episode. I went and I directed it. And it was like coming back home again. I mean, it was wonderful to see everybody. It was a different crew, the camera crew. All the other crew members were the same. Cast was the same and wonderful. And a very warm welcome, a great script with Jonathan, being featured so much. We had a great time. And because Rick liked my work again, he gave me the Deep Space Nine, and that led to so many more episodes, between Deep Space Nine and Voyager and Enterprise before the show ended.
18 in total.
And during all of those, I would come and go. I left for a while, and I went to do a show called University Hospital and Burke's Law, and then I came back, and finally I actually became executive vice president of Spelling Television when I left doing all the Deep Space Nines. And Rick contacted me 2 years later to offer me the Enterprise pilot. And luckily, Spelling was owned by Paramount. So I was able to go to Aaron Spelling and say, I've been offered this pilot for Star Trek. Would you let me go do it? And he said, yes. So that worked out.
Well, that leads me to my next question. One is, you were dealing with Rick Berman a lot. Was Gene Roddenberry actively involved with you during this first season of Next Generation?
Yes, during Justice, he was very involved. That was only episode 5 or 6, and
that sounds about right.
And he did the final draft of the script, and that script is very much a Gene Roddenberry original series show. So he was, and I loved him. He was great. And then I didn't get to work with him on the last one very much because of the writer's strike. Technically, he wasn't able to, render any writing services. So he was around, but he wasn't able to do what he did on the first one we did together.
And that leads me to my next question, which is stylistically between Roddenberry and Rick Berman or Aaron Spelling. I really want to know, what kind of differences do you see in the way that they run their empires, the Aaron Spelling / Roddenberry kind of stylistically?
Well, let me start with Roddenberry. He was a writer-producer, and he had a very specific vision, which he saw through the original series and then continued to Next Generation. So it was really his vision, and he was very specific about it. And that was good because you knew exactly it was a good vision and a lot of fun, and you knew what you wanted to do. Aaron, who was also a writer-producer, he started as a writer. He had such a wide range of television shows, from Charlie's Angels to Starsky and Hutch to Matt Houston to Hotel to Love Boat, all different styles. And he was a master of high concept and casting. And to him, he loved the casting process. He was great at it. And he could smell a high concept show that he thought would be a hit. His taste was very much in sync with America's taste at the time. So he just churned out hit after hit after hit. He always had control, but he let the showrunners run with the day-to-day operation. Though he read every script, he was involved in the casting of every show. He was very hands-on.
Jamie, something I'm noticing when we're talking with you right now is we ask you a question. You don't think about it very long. You answer it with certainty. You're very clear-headed. Your thought process is quick. And I'm wondering if that must have been something that made you very attractive as a director when people are looking to work under time constraints, major time constraints and deadlines. Do you
and
think,
as an executive running
yeah.
Spelling's productions,
Do you think that was one of the big things that Star Trek, saw in you, the why they kept calling you back is you knew what you wanted, you were quick with it, you were certain. That's really important in a leadership role.
Yeah, there are two things. As a director, I prepared completely. So I had my whole shot list worked out. When we went to the set, I knew exactly what I wanted. And I would go, we'd rehearse it. I'd sort of put them where I want. The actors would have ideas. We'd get it blocked. They'd light it. And then when we started shooting, I'd go, if I liked it, cut print over here, cut print over here. No wasted time in between. No long discussions after takes. So you got a lot done. And I tended to accomplish more in a day than other directors did. And to your other question, yes, I'm very decisive, and I think quickly. So when people ask a question, and there's a lot of people asking you questions when you're a director, and if your ability is to answer boom, 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 and answer correctly, hopefully, and still be collaborative, it can really work to your advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there were a few things that jumped out to me as maybe signs of the time for this episode. One of them was the music accents for the comedy moments.
Yeah.
When, for example, when the woman wakes up from her cryogenic sleep and sees Worf's face and falls back down, there was a, wah, wah, yeah. And I thought to myself, they don't do that anymore. That's very typical of the time period,
Right.
So I wanted to ask you about if you were involved in some of those decisions, or they do those in post and you're not really there for those moments. I know it's a time period thing, so they like to hit comedy notes and those at that time period. And then the other question I had for you was about lighting. One of our executive producers, Jason Okun, always talks about the lighting on the set and sometimes seeing reflections of lighting. And I noticed that in this episode, in one particular shot on the bridge, there was a reflection of a light that I know had been placed somewhere for the purpose of lighting the set and the actors. What kind of improvements were made over time to reduce the amount of those kinds of light reflections?
To answer your second question first, the way they solved it on the Next Generation is turn that off. Okay. Sorry about that. Hey, now it's that. Wait a minute, I'll get it there. Okay, done. Sorry. So they replaced the director of photography. So you had a new DP on season 2 who changed the philosophy of the lighting. Season 1 was very traditional, a lot of hard lights. Those are harder to disguise, I think. It takes longer to light. And those are big sets to light. And I believe it was, I can't remember who came in the second year, if it was Marvin or if it was Jonathan West, but they just changed the lighting style.
It was Marvin, yeah.
Yeah, Marvin. So there was more soft light, and that was one thing. I don't remember the reflection thing that much as an issue, but that was that. In terms of the music, the direct episodic directors, you once you finish shooting, you go in with the editor and you put together your director's cut. So it's going to be shown to the producers the way I intended it, and then that's it. You're done. You have no more involvement in any of the post production. The producers change what they want. They do the music. You're allowed to come to the mix if you want to. Nobody does. That's different when I did the pilot for Enterprise, where I was involved in everything all the way. But an episodic director's job ends when you turn over your director's cut. It's really a producer's medium from that point on.
Okay. Yeah, I noticed the music as well, but especially during the tense moments, there was like almost like the piano, the keys playing almost like a tingling kind of feeling, and it kind of jumped out at me. And again, this, like Cirroc said, this felt very much like something they used to do, where the music is almost a character of its own in a way. Like it kind of stands out, making it more scary, and it's more prominent. And I should have looked up who it was that did the scoring. I don't know if you remember, but was that something, Jamie, that you would ever picture in your mind when you're directing? Like, oh, it'd be nice if there was this kind of music, I'll see if I can suggest that later. Or was that just totally, that's their thing, this is my thing? Was it like a totally separate kind of department?
In this show, I never thought about music at all. Other shows at the time were incorporating rock music and things throughout the episodes. It was just becoming vogue. So you'd always keep an eye on, what you might want to do musically in contemporary music, to like a detective show or something, but not in this case. And back in those days, every score was done by a 20 or 30 piece orchestra. They would gather every week to do an episode, and there were these big orchestras that would come in and do it. Now it's all done on the synthesizer, but it was a huge deal. I mean, you'd have 20, 30 orchestra people in there, and they'd be scoring all these TV shows. It was quite remarkable.
It was Ron Jones again. I just looked it up. That guy was just freaking amazing.
Yeah, he did a lot of work on the show. Do you recall any interaction with Maurice Hurley? We've seen his name come up a lot. He's always on the credits, and he's obviously credited for this teleplay. But I don't know if you had any interaction with him specifically because he was on strike for this episode.
I did a lot on the first episode, and I'm sure he was there in a producer capacity, not writing when I was there. But I liked Maurice. He was a really nice guy. A lot of energy, a lot of good ideas. He was funny. And I don't know if he left the show that year or the next year. I can't remember, but he was a good guy.
And we only have you for another minute here, Jamie. Really appreciate you taking the time today. But before you go on that subject, can you tell us what that means when what was it called? Television story by Maurice Hurley. We've seen obviously teleplay by, we get it, story by, we get it. When they say written by, it's a combination of both. But television, Maurice Hurley was television story and teleplay by. I don't understand that. Do you have any idea?
Unless the screenplay was originally based on a short story or maybe a novelization that they borrowed it from, and it was written by those first two people you mentioned. I don't know. I don't remember the history. Let's see what it says. It says story. I'm looking at the credits here. Story by Deborah McIntyre and Mona Clee. I don't know if they were on staff or what the deal is with them. Let me just see here.
Yeah, this is the first time we've seen television story by as a credit for Maurice Hurley.
Somebody may have submitted, in those days, the writing staffs were smaller and you would freelance, and especially Star Trek, people would come in and pitch ideas. So it may have been an idea that was pitched and they turned in a story, but there was nothing usable except the idea. So Maurice redid the story and then did the teleplay, and that was how it was arbitrated. That's all I can imagine.
Yeah. Or it could have also been an idea for a book or something that wasn't meant for the TV episode, but they maybe stole it from there. But I did like the concepts. I thought they came up, once again, this first season of Next Generation, they come up with really good themes to touch upon. They just don't fully execute, in hindsight, what we know now. The topics that they could highlight on. I believe there's just moments there where you see, oh, this is a great idea. Cryogenics. I would love to know more about waking up from a cryogenic sleep. But
yeah, along those lines, nobody in the cast talked about it or speculated about it. They never made it personal to them. It was just three people, and in terms of modern writing, that would never happen. You have that happen, and somehow it would have to impact on your main characters or influence the story somewhere. But it never did.
It never did, except for just walking on the bridge or something like that, but it wasn't like a real intersection of storyline.
And that was weird too when Peter Mark Mitchman comes on the set and suddenly becomes part of the negotiation.
Yeah. It's like, who let this guy in?
I recognize that actor so much, but I could not place what I knew him from. I'm sure he's been in a ton of stuff.
A ton of things. He was one of these guest star of the week actors, very reliable, always on probably hundreds of shows. And then what's his name? Who was one of the Romulans was obviously.
Yeah.
I was wondering. Yeah. Yes, Cirroc, you caught that voice, right?
I caught it. You can't miss Mark Alimo. He's such a fine actor. He's just the way he pronounces things. It's his enunciation, the voice, the way he commands respect and challenges Picard. He is a very good adversary for a main character in a show.
Yeah, he was great.
I wonder if he's ever not played a villain or antagonist. I feel like he's only been like he knows what he can do. Like he's the bad guy and he's one of the best at it.
One thing that I always had to do is I always wanted to meet these actors without their makeup. So I either tried to see them before or after, just so I know what they really look like, because the change is remarkable sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
Well, Jamie, we really appreciate you taking the time today. It was so great.
Absolutely.
Seeing you again. We hope to see you again sometime soon, maybe for a duet or something like that. But, if Star Trek calls you now and says, you say hello, they say, hey, this is so-and-so from Star Trek. Hello, Mr. Conway. Can I call you Jamie? And you say no. And they say, well, we'd love to have you direct an episode for us. What do you say? You say yes, or do you say I'm done? I'm tired.
Probably the only show I would come back and do again would be Star Trek. So I'd say yes.
Oh,
that's so cool.
All right. You heard it, guys.
Yeah.
We gotta get to work on the keyboards and make it happen. Make it so.
Warriors.
Yeah, make it so.
Anyway, thank you so much, Jamie. 18 episodes you've directed on 4 Star Trek series, and you've been a producer, a writer, and a director on countless other shows. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Thank you so much. Everybody at home, stick around. We've got a lot more on the 7th rule. We're going to be covering more of this episode. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the 7th rule with Cirroc freaking Lofton.
Hello.
All right. You know what we're doing. My name is Ryan T. Husk. It's time for the Trivioids. Not a ton in this one. Captain Picard was summoned to Starbase 718 for an emergency conference. Worf walks into a door. There's been no direct contact with the Romulans since the Tomed incident. Ralph Offenhouse wants a copy of the Wall Street Journal. LQ Sonny Clemens wants a martini straight up with 2 olives. TV isn't going to last beyond 2040. And Sonny Clemens thinks the future is the same dance, just a different tune. So Cirroc, you answered my question in the previous thing that I was going to ask you here, which was you recognize that Romulan's voice.
Oh yeah, it was Mark Alimo. Right away I was like, oh, that's Mark Alimo.
Yeah.
I didn't have to really, it didn't take me long. He's got a voice that and a way of talking that is so unique. It's almost unrecognizable. There's no way not to recognize it. It just pops out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'd always picture you when I'm watching these things at certain points. And when Mark Alimo came up, my first thought was, ooh, I'm kind of excited to see if maybe Cirroc doesn't notice, if it like sneaks in. But then as soon as he started talking, I was like, there's no way it's going to pass under his nose. Because he goes, They go, oh, Captain, Commander Sovek or whatever it was, Tomed or something like that. And they go, what's up with you? And he goes, well, today we've, as soon as he started speaking, I'm from the Romulan Star Empire. And he just I was like, okay, there's no way. It's not going to sneak past. So I pictured you like, doodling or taking notes, and you hear that voice and you go,
that's exactly what I did. I leaned in, I wrote Mark Alimo, Commander Tabak or whatever.
Yeah.
And he says, "Silence your dog, Captain."
Oh, so good.
Oh my God. I was like, he's right on. I was like, is that Ducat? I almost thought it was Ducat. Yeah, I know he was supposed to be a Romulan, but I was like, is Ducat with the Romulans? He's so amazing. I don't see how you don't hire him as the villain right off just this episode. Just seeing him do this, you're like, I'm hiring him. You're booked, bro.
So we saw him as one of the dogs in the Snakes and Dogs episode, if you remember, an Antikin, where he didn't really say much or do much. It was a little tougher to recognize him. But then obviously they brought him back for this and used his skills a little bit more, but still not a ton of lines. Kind of a small thing. But you'll be glad to know this is not the last time you see him in Star Trek The Next Generation. We will be seeing him in the future. And so he definitely built his resume where every time he gets an appearance in Star Trek, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger until then he becomes Gul Dukat.
He's just amazing. Was this the first time we heard Captain Picard say, "Make it so"? Because it did sound like it felt like it.
I don't
stood
think so.
out.
It's one of them. I think only, but not a ton. Not a ton. It's certainly one of the first times, and he does seem to be coming into his own a lot more. Where he's just a little bit more comfortable, a little less agitated, a little bit more comfortable. Although he was a little snippy with Worf and Riker saying, no red alert, no weapons. Okay. And he's like, yellow alert would be prudent. Pats on the head, That's an okay idea.
Speaking of pats, what about that guy? What was his name? LQ Sonny.
Yeah.
When he gave Beverly a nice little pat on the ass as he was walking out.
Did he do that? I missed it.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God, that's so bad.
Yeah, he was in the room and he says something and he gives her a pat on the ass. And I was hoping you caught it because I was thinking of Pat Beverly.
Very nice. Very nice. That's a lot of work. But
that was a lot of work, but he actually did do that. He did do that. I thought, wow, that was crazy.
That's it must have been when he complimented her looks. I don't remember, what did he say? He said to her, and he called her pretty.
I
don't remember what. Anyway, he said something nice to her, and it was kind of rude. Obviously he meant it as a he says he calls her pretty, and she was just kind of like, what the fuck was that? But then he was funny when he said, I want to check to see how the Braves are doing. That was funny. Yeah. And then he says, the interesting thing was when he heard about the Romulans from Data, and he says, why does that make me nervous? Data says, I do not know. And he says, but we won't be inviting them to our party. Data says, no, that would not be appropriate. So this guy's still catching on. God, I wish I'd seen the pat on the butt. That is so rude.
It was super rude. It was just this kind of chauvinism just thrown in there. I noticed they said that TV dies in 2040. I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah.
Star Trek is good for making predictions. They did the whole Bell riots in 2024 and actually referred back to it in Picard. And now they're telling us that TV will officially essentially be dead in 2040, which the internet is doing a good job of fulfilling that destiny.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I was really disappointed, I have to say, with this episode overall, though. I thought that as a season finale, I needed way more Romulans and way less cryogenic people.
It almost felt like this could have just been episode 17. Just whatever. But the most that it gave us was just the promise that things are going to get heavier. Like when they said the Romulans appeared for the first time in 50 years. And at the end, Dukat says, "We are coming," or "We are back," or something
We're
like
back.
that.
Yeah.
And okay, that's cool. That's great. That's the big thing. But you could have given us more than that. I mean, it's cute.
Yeah.
It's good. It gives us something to hang on to. And so it's almost like they're saying, all right, never mind. The Ferengi weren't very as scary as we thought they were. Well, let's go with the Romulans. The Romulans are scary. They're going to be the new bad guys. You know, it's like, felt like that's what they're doing.
Which I'm okay with, but make the episode more about the Romulans and not about these three cryogenic people. This episode with the cryogenic people gave me the vibes of the Deep Space Nine episode where those genius
statistical probabilities, those four weirdos that were like super smart.
Yeah, this gave me a statistical probabilities vibe with these kinds of bringing in three guest stars to be the star of the episode, you know, and the storyline not exactly being as good as I want it to be. This is what it felt like.
Yeah, didn't feel like
I would have liked. No, it didn't feel like a finale. I would have liked more of a Twilight Zone-ish type of spin in this episode. It would have been great had the people in the satellite that was discovered or whatever that ship was, if they were all dead except for one person.
Yeah.
And it would also have been good if that ship was an ancient or like an old spaceship. So like basically the beginning of, you know, space program, like us starting to traverse space in a larger way, like a pioneer space program type of thing. And then there would have been more relationship there between the people that they found, who, you know, or the person that they would have found, who would have been an explorer themselves and seen the starship as, you know, something that they would have wanted to have seen, a dream of theirs, you know, and it would have had a different feel to it than these, you know, a country western guitar guy and a Wall Street investor prick. I think it would have been better if it was, for me, an actual astronaut or astronauts, you know, who were involved in space exploration, maybe an international space station or international space exploration team, you know, and only one person survived, and there's a murder mystery. Why did everybody die? Maybe that one person who survived killed the rest of the people. There could be more to this episode.
You know, what you're describing, it does sound a little similar to other Star Trek episodes, especially Voyager. Voyager has one or two episodes like that, like what you're saying. Everybody listening in, if you know the one I'm talking about, I don't want to give any spoilers just in case, but if you'll recall, there was a person in Earth's early flight history that is found by Voyager and the crew, and it's a really interesting, you know, kind of mystery there. But anyway, yeah, no, I mean, you're right. That's the reason it was done in future episodes, is because they improved and they're like, let's work on this a little better and hone our craft. And so, you know, that does give us something a little bit more to sink our teeth into. Although in 1988, I do remember the people in, you know, the late 80s and 90s were talking about cryogenics. It was like a big thing. And then it kind of just fizzled out, right? Do we even talk about cryogenics anymore? I don't think so. I think
the most famous person I know that's been involved with cryogenics was Walt Disney. And from my understanding, he was frozen after he died. And I guess he's the biggest celebrity of the cryogenic period, but there's other people that have asked for that, have requested that. I thought it was interesting that they brought up the power failures issue of cryogenics. Like, you know, companies fell out of business because they weren't properly supplying power. I like the fact that they brought up the idea that putting the cryogenics into orbit would provide the kind of vacuum and temperatures that you would
Vacuum
need.
sealed.
Yeah. So those were good concepts. Just not for a season finale for me.
Yeah, so we unfortunately have to run in just a second here. So let's do our home run of the day. Who do you got?
Home run of the day. Let's see. I'm gonna go with Picard in this episode. Yeah, I'm gonna say that Picard did a lot to carry a very lackluster episode. There were moments that I liked when he, for example, told Worf, "Control your emotions."
You should shake him when he's doing it.
Yeah, and then I also liked specifically his last line of this episode, which I thought was the home run, and that's when he says, "Our mission is to go forward, and it's just begun."
Yeah, when he said, something about going back there, and he said, "No, that would be in the wrong. That would be going in the wrong direction." I'm like, we need to pay attention to that still today.
Yes,
it's subtle, but he's saying, no, that's the wrong direction. We must go forward. Well, I'll tell you, my home run of the day, I think, goes to Ron Jones, the music guy, because that was just great music, great scoring. Really appreciated it. I think that's the big winner for me. Before we go, we're going to give a very special thanks to Homer Frizzell, Dr. Anne-Marie Segal, Eve England out in Wales, Yvette, Blackmon-Tom, TJ, Jackson-Bey out in Missouri, Bill Victor Arucan, our good pal Titus Mohler, Darlena Marie, Dr. Mohamed Noor, Tierney C. Dieckmann on a post. Congratulations. She's got a little baby that's super cute. Anil O. Polat, Joe Balsarotti, Mike Gu, Dequeue, Neal, Akasaka, Justine Norton-Kertson, Dr. Stephanie Baker, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, Edward Foltz, live from Tokyo, the Matt Boardman, Chris McGee, Justin Weir, Jake Barrett, Jane Jorgensen, Henry Unger, Allison, Leach-Heid, Julie Manasfi, Nikki T, Dr. Susan V. Gruner, and Jason Okun, the aforementioned. We'll be right back, everybody. Stick around. We got the free-for-all next on The Seventh Rule. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Seventh Rule. This is the free-for-all. Melissa calls it the freak-for-all, which is rude.
Get your freak flag on.
Yeah. So everybody, Melissa Longo is here, of course, wearing an awesome self-sealing stem bolt shirt with Jake and Nog that I love so much. Check that out. Look how cute they are. That's another JJ Lendl creation. Allison, Leach-Heid is also here. Is that an Abyssinian kiosk shirt? Wow,
nice.
Cool. I could tell because of the streaks. Faith Howell is on the Enterprise D, of course. We just said hello to her dad that started the whole thing. Jason Okun is here with an awesome background as per usual. Mai is live in Tokyo with Gul Dukat behind her. I'm so used to saying Gul Dukat now. She also has the isolinear chip shirt. Eve England also has an Abyssinian kiosk shirt. We've got the Dark Lord here looming, Chris McGee. Carrie Schwent is floating out in space. Justin Weir's got a Romulan ship, which is like 3 or 4 times the size of the Enterprise. And so does Matt Boardman, except his might have been just made by him.
Not this one.
Okay.
It looks,
Because he's a great VFX guy, everybody. So he could actually make ships and does. So it wouldn't surprise us. Anyway, I'm scared. Jake Sisko guesses the IMDb score.
Oh boy.
6.6. 6.6.
Does anybody else have a guess that doesn't already know?
6.2.
Yeah, 6.2 is what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah, this was not good.
I accidentally saw it.
Well, It seems
I
the answer is
intentionally look.
yeah. The answer is I thought it was a 6.5 or 6.62 when I'd seen it before, but it turns out it's a 7.4.
What?
What? You reading that right? Is it a 4.7?
I thought
Maybe
it was a
Sue
6.
and Marie have gone on to give it a 10, so the average has gone up.
Oh,
Yeah, she created a lot of accounts. It's a 7.4, everybody. So put some respect
Wow.
on that name right there. It's a good one. You guys are so rude. I saw that. Melissa Longo, what did you think of this very good 7.4 episode?
Well, I have obviously thought more highly of it than most of my constituents in this chat. I didn't dislike it as vehemently as I'm getting. Because I like the idea of exploring what it would, and maybe this is why, because it asks a really interesting question. What would I be like in 300 years if I was woken up after a deep sleep? And what would my first questions be? And I think I would be very curious about everything. Yeah, curiosity would be my main drive. And I can get why people might be frustrated with it, because the one dude who was asking about his stocks and whatever is so worried about money. He's kind of got tunnel vision. He just woke up after 300 years.
Yeah, give
Dude.
him a break.
No, no, he was a Karen. I mean,
Yeah, he was.
he was a space Karen that had just been woken up. But I did like the woman, because she was asking questions that I think that somebody might actually ask after being woken up after 300 years. I noticed that her ancestor was Gene Roddenberry, and the picture, it was Gene Roddenberry.
was it?
On the screen. Yeah, I was like,
Was
that's
it?
Gene Roddenberry. Yeah.
Didn't see it.
And I liked the character Leon Rippey played, but I like him as an actor in general, and he had some really good lines in this. I'm not going to go through them all because Mochi's distracting, but yeah, my and I really love seeing the Romulan ship for the first time. That was pretty dope. My critique, I would say, is that the episode did kind of feel a little disjointed, like they could have been 2 separate episodes. But yeah, that's it. Overall, I was it kept my attention the whole way through.
Yep. Leon Rippey. Never heard of the guy, but he was good.
Yeah, I like him.
Allison Leach-Heid is here. She's also never heard of Leon Rippey, but what did you think of this episode?
So this episode is clunky, and in some ways it really should be. This was the last episode they wrote before the writer's strike, and Maurice got a day and a half to write the script, and that was it. No rewrites or anything. So for that, I think it's a really good episode. Because, yeah, I mean, pumping out 45 minutes of dialogue in a day and a half has got to be hard. So for that, no, it's a good episode. It just isn't as good as it could have been. So I'll give him kudos for that, because that was not an easy task he was given. So no rewrites, no nothing, just here you go. This is what you get to do and perform it. So that's why I think there's some plot holes and I can't even say the word right now.
That's okay. It's the free for all. We're just chilling.
Oh, got it. And my favorite line, I think, is just give me a martini straight up with 2 olives for the vitamins, because we've been getting a lot of items the last 2 episodes. So that's cool.
Yeah. Actually, James Conway was telling us about that, right, Cirroc, about how it was a writer's strike going on, and so they couldn't do any rewrites. This is basically like a first draft, and then they just kind of had to just work on that. So everybody keep that in mind.
Really had so much he wanted to do for this. He wanted to introduce the Borg, have it be a 3-parter. So yeah, it got really scoped down a lot.
Wow.
Wanted the Romulans and the Federation to, form an alliance to go take on the Borg. But yeah, writer's strike kind of took that out for us, at least according to Memory Alpha. So.
Oh, that was big scope that they wanted to go. That's big. Faith Howell is here. It's always great having her too, by the way. What did you think of this episode?
I am kind of in the middle. I agree with Melissa that I didn't think it was terrible. I think they had some good ideas starting out, but I just felt like it wasn't finished. It felt like it maybe the very beginning of what should have been a big arc, which I didn't think TNG really was supposed to be doing that. So it just feels out of place a little bit. I think that's maybe where some of you guys are hating on this episode, that it's just, it feels like we're building up to something with the Romulans and then the end, see ya. Mm-hmm. And I was also, I have that in my notes as well. Borg ? Is this the Borg? I guess we don't know them yet. And sorry, Cirroc. But yeah.
I thought the same thing. I thought the same thing too.
But yeah, I do really like Mai's background, because yay, Ducat is our first Romulan ever. Ha
Mm-hmm. Pretty awesome.
Second Mark Alime appearance though.
Already, yeah.
Isn't he like the first Cardassian that we ever see too?
I think so.
Well, we don't know that yet. We'll see. Who knows?
Everybody be watching out. First Cardassian.
Thanks very much, Faith Howell. Jason Okun, the aforementioned, is here. What's up, Jason? What do you think of this episode?
Well, I mean, a lot's been said about it being kind of, I would say, half-baked. And obviously, the history of the script makes it, pretty clear as to why that happened. I mean, in some ways, I find the episode probably one of the more campy episodes of certainly the first season. And there's certain charm in that. I'm not sure I want Star Trek to be campy, but this certainly is. And, having the 3 people from so-called from the so-called past make it feel like that. I mean, in some ways, we've seen people did, sort of in suspended animation from the 90s on Star Trek before, done a little bit better than this in the original series. So there's shades of that as well. Certainly, it does borrow quite heavily from that. It also borrows from another original series episode where you have, the Balance of Terror, where you have Romulans rampaging and ransacking outposts near the neutral zone that causes sort of, the suspicion that it's the Romulans that are attacking, So that was kind of interesting to see them, at least bring that up in a very sort of subtle way. I think, not that I don't have my list of things that I noticed, but it's probably shorter than most others. Interestingly enough, I think some of it has to do with maybe Jim Conway's sort of keeping kind of a tight lid on it. Not everything, but he certainly held it together, I think. There's nothing spectacular here, but at least in some ways it's held together better than it probably had any right to, based on its history. It's clunky and it's forgettable, but it's certainly watchable, which is better than some of the others we've looked through.
All right, great stuff. Thank you very much, Jason. We had a poll, and everybody thinks that you do like Star Trek campiness. Everybody knows you got a soft spot for the camp. Mai is live in Tokyo here. What's up, Mai? How are you? What did you think of this one?
I thought we had some of the best humor of the season on this. Worf with the door not opening and the lady fainting.
Yes.
I was laughing my ass off. I thought it was hilarious.
Yes.
And what's this guy's name? Subcommander Thay? Is it this guy here? Do you guys ever watch Mork and Mindy when you were kids? This guy's hardcore channeling Exidor. I mean, dig this. That's Exidor. Definitely.
Yeah.
100% Exidor. So anyway, I thought that was it. On a serious note, though, the cultural divide due to time, it makes me wonder, are we ever really going to get there, given where we are now? The behavior, it strikes me very much as general U.S. culture, but not global culture per se. The selfishness, the greed. And this episode appeared to be a bit of a condemnation of U.S. society. I note that there are other ways of doing things, different types of priorities, different levels of social behavior in other countries. Japan, for example, group good is a big component of the culture here. Greed is not so much a part of middle-class focused cultures in Europe. But this, in one way, this was not like U.S. culture at all. There were 3 pure white people, and I was like, what's up with that? So anyway, this led me to thinking about the community here, and not only just with all of you, but with the chat pack as well. Here, I'm part of something that's so much closer to the ideals of Star Trek than current U.S. society. It just continues to amaze me. It's a microcosm of what we can be as people, as humans. I think a lot of that stems, not stem bolts, but stems from Aaron's inspiration as well. So just want to say to you here, all of you in the chat, you rock. That's it.
Awesome. Thanks very much. You rock too, by the way, everybody knows. But since you brought up Laverne and Shirley, does everybody know the other tie-in, the other character in Laverne and Shirley, where the actor also showed up in Star Trek and a very memorable character? I think Carrie knows. She was nodding her head.
I almost. I can see it, but I can't think of it.
It was the actor that played Lenny, Michael McKean. He played that scary clown in the Voyager episode.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that really good Voyager episode.
Yeah. One of the best.
I love that episode.
Okay. So that's the trivia there for him. I believe that's the only one he did. He also is in Better Call Saul as Saul's brother. Really good actor. Really, really good. Anyway,
and an even worse Voyager episode too, where her ancestor goes back to the past.
Really?
And he's in the X-Files.
Okay.
And Clue.
Cirroc's like, wake me up when he's in Twilight Zone. Or Columbo. Eve England is out in Wales. She thinks Columbo is a kind of bread. What did you think of this one?
Yeah, I mean, the reason I thought it was a low score is, again, not because it wasn't watchable necessarily. It was because, this is supposed to be the season finale, and it just seemed a bit flat and disjointed, as everyone said. So a few points so I found it a really interesting episode in terms of the storylines that they were raising, but I just felt that it didn't kind of explore them enough, or explore the more interesting dynamics of the different stories. I mean, one thing, and again, this season 1 has really not helped Picard and how he's presented, in my view. I don't know if anybody else just thought it was really strange how he was just so disinterested in going on to this ancient ship. And then, he's supposed to be this explorer. It's like me saying, oh yeah, someone's discovered the Mary Rose and I, don't give a shit. It's like, well, obviously you really would. You'd be interested to find out for something that was so historical in that way. And then the fact that even though we knew they were dead, it just didn't seem very progressive or very kind to kind of just leave them there and just dismiss them. That to me just didn't feel very Starfleet or Federation or very progressive. So I thought that was really interesting, and interesting that Data, the non-human, was actually the most human to these individuals than anyone else. So I thought that was really interesting. But in terms of that plot line, I mean, I didn't like the way that they were a bit preachy. As Maya was saying, I think they were obviously making a comment about society, but I just felt it came across way too preachy, and they were just way too arrogant. And again, I don't think that presented Starfleet in a particularly good light. But it made me think. I was thinking, if somebody wakes up in 300 years time. When I first started, I thought, how do they even communicate? How do they understand each other? Because that's such a long period of time.
Exactly.
I was thinking, if you went back to medieval times, and it reminded me of that Michael Crichton book Timeline, where those students go back to medieval France, and obviously, even though they could all speak French and they'd studied the language, they just couldn't understand it or communicate at all because it's so different. So then I was thinking, okay, that was a big sort of nitpick originally, and then I thought, oh, but actually maybe if you think about, that was certainly the case possibly from the 90s.
Universal translators,
right? Universal.
Yeah, but even I'm not sure that it would necessarily have that bank of sort of the repertoire from that time ago. But then I was thinking, well, actually, if you're looking at it from that point to 400 years in the future, the way that we do record, there's much more standardization of language than that you had in, say, medieval times, for example, where things were not communicated, written down, recorded. Whereas now, obviously, we have everything recorded. So even in 300 years' time, you'd think that scholars could go back and listen to people on YouTube or whatever and understand that kind of language. So I just thought that was a really interesting thing, and it would have been nice for them to explore some of, and as Melissa said, it's that personal thing and the actual practicalities of coming out of that sort of sleep after that much time, and that would have been really interesting. And I think it could have had an episode all by itself just for that. So yeah, so I thought like I said, it didn't quite all come together, but I thought that storyline was an interesting one in of itself, and it was very watchable overall, but it was just a bit disappointing for a season finale, I thought.
Excellent point about the language, though. I thought that myself. 400 years later, 400 years from now, we're not going to be able to understand what we're saying right now, especially because I think language is going to be accelerating in how quickly it changes. Since
you jive turkey.
I don't know what that means. Where's that from?
Yeah, so Raffi wouldn't know what roadkill is. Just saying. If Picard, she says roadkill, she wouldn't know what roadkill is.
Oh, you guys, by the way, Chris McGee helps to remind us, because he says he's Chris High Mileage McGee. Did you guys catch the line where they say low mileage? What the heck? What do they call
it? Woofies.
Something woofy.
Yeah,
yes,
he says.
I love that.
He says, "Why don't you come back later on? You and me will find us a couple low mileage pit woofies and help them build a memory." Would you believe our good buddy Anne-Marie Segal found this? There's actually a card based on this from like some Star Trek game called Star Trek CCG 2nd edition, the expansion, A Time to Stand. And there's this card, apparently it's 3 points, dead weight, dilemma, and this guy's dead weight. So anyway, they actually made a card from it. Thank you for reminding us of that, Chris High Mileage McGee. And by the way, if anybody knows what that actually means, let us know in the comments below, because I have sounds naughty. What do you think of this episode, Chris?
Want me to spoil it for you?
Yeah.
Well, it's not. There isn't a a consensus as to what it means, but according to your friend in mind, Memory Alpha, the term low mileage refers to, of course, age and experience. The pit refers to like the orchestra pit or just in front of the band. Woofy refers to like a barker or screamer, thus a country music euphemism for a young, fairly naive band groupie.
Oh, a screamer would be a groupie. Got it.
As far as this episode, thank you, Allison, for explaining why this script wound up the way it did. That explains why a lot of critics consider this episode just an episode for an opportunity for the Romulans to say, "Hey, we are back." As has been mentioned, Ron Jones did an excellent tension building score in this one. Someone had mentioned that the pattern of destruction of the outposts seemed familiar, and without giving anything away, just keep that in mind for a future episode. You're not wrong. Just the idea of something, an entire civilization or whatever, or outpost being scooped up. Also, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but being the year 2023, when we're recording this, we only have about 17 years left to enjoy television before it. No one watches it anymore, apparently. As Maya commented, the conversation between Offenhouse and Picard was actually much more interesting than I thought it was the first time that I watched this episode. Very reminiscent of how like the rich in our society today, in fact, are so self-important, don't care about anyone else, even all but dismiss the military. So I saw a lot of interesting parallels, and I like that. One thing that caught my curiosity was when Mark Limo's character said towards the end, matters more urgent caused our absence. Now I'm curious what those matters were, why the Romulans disappeared for I don't know how many years. Don't recall any NAMs in this episode, non-appearance mentions. But my memorable quote, well, obviously the one that stuck with me for all these years is, of course, low mileage pit wolfies, but also I'll pick something a little less obvious and say much obliged.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. Thank you very much, Chris. High mileage McGee. Carrie Schwent is also here. Looks like a Decepticon shirt. Pretty freaking rad. What do you think of this episode?
I just came from the new movie.
Oh.
I like this episode, although honestly I think it would have been better to start season 2 with and have season 1 end with conspiracy, but I do enjoy it. Yeah. Marco Limo, he could read me the phone book just so I'd listen just to listen to that voice again. There were some very interesting Easter eggs. You almost kind of had to pause to notice them. But on the capsule at the top, there's a 4077, which is a reference to MASH. When Troy and Claire are going through the family tree of her descendants, her 2 sons, one married Mary Ann, one married Ginger from Gilligan's Island. The next tree down is the first names, and for middle initials, the initial of the main series cast: Marina S, Will W, etc. The next tree down is, in a similar fashion, the main characters from MASH. Kind of all of those. I found that out looking up on IMDb, and I thought it was fantastic. I loved Sonny. Anything with the Southern accent, I enjoy, and I love that. I love that actor, and him calling TV the boob tube. I haven't heard that since I was a kid. I had several relatives who would and did call it that. Data has his great parent-child sort of interaction with them waiting for Picard to show up. Oh no, look at this thing going by. Look, a box fell off this truck. Mom, can I go play with the box until Dad gets home, please, please, please? And then Picard gets back, and Daddy's home. I guess I'm in trouble now. Getting called down to sick bay. But yeah, Data and Sonny's interactions were just adorable, and he thought for like half a second about maybe going with him. It was very tempting for him to just hang out with this guy for a while. Now, my limerick for the episode, I decided to focus on them. So here we go. Data found 3 frozen people today. Been sleeping centuries, they say. Claire misses her family. Ralph is focused on money. Sonny just wants to sit and drink and play. So there
Excellent. We go. Thank you very much, Carrie Schwent, everybody. Up next is Mr. Justin Weir. What's up, Justin? What did you think about this episode?
Hello. This episode is kind of just okay to me. I didn't even realize that this was actually the finale until this rewatch. And Will Wheaton's not even in it. I didn't even write down much, so I'll be quick. I'm going to write down some quick thoughts that came to me when I was watching it. When Data and Worf beamed to the ship, did you notice that Worf walked right into the door like it was supposed to open?
Yes, it was
so
great.
Good.
I thought this episode was great because, of course, the Romulans. That's awesome. When Picard is in sickbay with Beverly, and he goes, "Before you wake him, I want security here." Worf. Immediately, I'm like, that's the worst choice. Like, he's comparing the Enterprise to a cruise ship. Yeah. Silence your dog, Captain. That, whew. But you guys were talking about it in the chat. I think Peter Mark Richmond, that character stood out because I've been rewatching Friday the 13th, and he's in part 8 where Jason takes Manhattan. He's the racist old captain of the ship they're on.
Very familiar. Very successful actor. Are you wearing a that looks like you got a Cirroc Lofton shirt? Yeah, you do. There he is, a Jake Sisko 7th Rule shirt. Which can be found at the 7th Rule Teespring store, everybody at home. So go check that out. You can find that at the link in the description box below. So just look for that thing, and it's just below me, just right below the video. So Matt Boardman is also here. What are you laughing at, Melissa? Matt Boardman is also here. What did you think of this episode?
I want to know what Melissa.
Melissa.
Sorry, I muted myself to sneeze because my allergies have been acting up. But Mochi knows every time a sneeze comes on, it's coming on, and she bolts out of the room.
She runs like for her life.
Yeah, so it stopped the sneeze, but gosh, that was worth the giggle.
I'm one of those people that scaring, and anytime a cat gets scared, I don't know why it's so funny, but it is so funny. It makes me laugh every time.
It's just, I guess it's the way I breathe when it's about to happen. And she just goes running.
She's like, oh, hell no.
Anyway, very sorry, Matt Boardman. Please continue.
No, that was totally worth it. Oh man, yeah, I like this episode. It's one of my season 1 favorites, and I mean it's interesting now to go through it, and now that I'm looking at them with a little bit more critical eye, like I didn't know that some of these episodes at the end of season 1 suffered from a writer's strike, and so I mean I think having been on productions myself, sometimes I'm a little more forgiving of that stuff because I know what it's like to be in that situation where, somebody along the way, like some executive, like I'll watch visual effects because that's that's what I do, and I never watch movies the same. But sometimes I'll see something that's like really bad, and I go, oh, I wonder if they ran out of time for that shot, because you never know when somebody goes, hey, you know what? I was watching this, and some executive, I should preface, because not just anybody can say this, my son thinks that should be blue instead of green, and then you have to go back and you have to redo it, and sometimes some of those requests come down the line and there's not enough time for that, and they don't realize it's not just the magic button that you press. And so I look at this kind of, and it's like, yeah, there is definitely stuff that Picard says that is very outside of the norm for what we're used to hearing. And I think that just suffers from that first draft. And I think I read too that this was the first time that this particular writer had done anything for science fiction. So I think, yeah, had that been the case, had they gone through a few more drafts, then we would have maybe had a little bit more refinement there. But I don't know, a lot of fun things. I mean, I love Sonny, I love the guitar. I mean, he's got some great lines, and I think the interaction between him and Data is fantastic. One thought I had while watching it, I was, the fact that Ralph Oppenheimer makes it to the bridge during a yellow alert. I'm like, how in the heck can anybody just say, take me to the bridge during a situation, during an alert situation? I would think that there would be some protocols that would, given the ship is all voice automated, that would say, you don't have authorization to be on the bridge at this time. But that being said, it did set up a pretty good moment where he totally calls out the Romulans. He's like, he has no idea who did this. They're hoping you do, and I like that Picard recognized that in the moment, because Riker's kind of like, oh, get this dude out of here. He's like, okay, yeah, he's out of line, but he's right. So, and then Mark Alimo, man, that guy, let me tell you, he plays a villain really, really well. Like he just brings it. And I'm watching, and the fact that he just sits there with it, like he's not even doing anything other than an expression on his face that just commands power. And that's just, I don't know, that's just one of the brilliance of him. And, we see that obviously in Dukat, but like we get that first glimpse of like, okay, this dude knows what he's doing when it comes to playing a Star Trek villain. Mark Alimo's your go-to. So that was that's my thoughts on the episode.
You don't even have to add the second syllable in go-to. He's the goat. Cirroc Lofton like that reference. Any final thoughts, Cirroc, before we run?
Yeah, I wish they did something different with the cryogenic story. I think it's a great storyline. I would have loved to see something more with that. I felt like these characters were kind of stereotype characters, the wealthy guy and the country singer guy. And they weren't dynamic enough. They weren't layered. It was very kind of stereotype. And I would have liked to see something different. I would have liked to see maybe like a cryogenic love story, a kind of Romeo and Juliet love story where a couple is frozen together. Maybe one of them wakes up, the other one is trying to wake up, and maybe the one that is woken up has to decide whether the future was good enough for the two of them to live in together. And it could have been more there, in my opinion. This should have been more about the Romulans. They could have given us more Romulan tension, more battle scenes. I would have liked to see a shot across the bow on this one, or some more tension. Where I felt like there was going to be some harm done to them. That would have been better for me. I really felt like it was two B storylines. They didn't have it really set which the A storyline was going to be and how clear it was going to be. I did like the fact that Data and Worf were out there examining their space junk. I thought that was fun.
Excuse me.
And I thought you would like the way I worded that, Ryan. So, and with Leon Rippey, believe it or not, I like him. Also, I don't know. Did you guys see the Pat Beverly? Not the doctor. Did you see? Did you see Beverly Crusher get patted on the butt in that one scene? I kind of would have liked a slap there. I wouldn't have minded a slap, a nice quick slap. No, we don't play that.
That was after he tried to score drugs.
I wrote that in my notes.
By the way.
With some kind of line about like, I don't care what century you're from.
Yeah. ... Yeah.
Whatever.
We don't play that. Boom. A nice slap or something to check him in that moment. He deserved it and he would have earned that one. So I kind of would have liked that. I also saw that the Braves was mentioned in this episode. He wanted to watch the Braves. I was wearing an Atlanta Braves hat in the baseball episode. So it made me think of the Braves now having its second NAM in Star Trek unofficially.
Right. It's true. And take
so I thought that was cool. Yeah. I thought that was cool. I saw a parallel between the statement about the accumulation of things and collecting material things and how material needs no longer exist. I thought that was similar to what we saw with Odo talking about collecting material things. I thought it was a similar kind of concept there. And yeah, I did like the Make It So in this. I don't know if it was the first time we heard the Make It So or how many times it's been done, but in this particular episode, it resonated with me the way he delivered the line. It felt like this is the one. This is when they found, a phrase that he likes and it works for him. It was well delivered. And yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Oh, there was a moment too. I noticed really quickly that Riker, when he got into the elevator, he turned really fast. Did one of these like quick turns, and he's good for those kinds of miniature body language comedy that he'll insert for just a small thing. And I liked it. But overall, you could tell that this episode lacked the rewrites, because the writers sit back and they probably would have seen this is a little slow here. We're not doing enough with these characters. Let's change this. Let's change that. And I think they would have made it flow a lot better and brought in some more themes that they were trying to introduce for next season and set up this first episode of second season better than they did in this episode. So obviously the writer's strike handicapped Jamie from really doing his thing in this episode. So everybody was under constraints, and it's kind of reflective. Not my best season finale episode. This could easily have been a regular season episode, and I would have been cool with it. But as a season finale, you kind of look for a little bit more. You expect more. You expect more on the beginning first episode, and you expect more on the last episode. And you can give me the filler stuff in between, but I don't want filler stuff at the end. So that's my take on this.
That's it, everybody. We are done with this episode, and it seems like everybody's like, good, tired of it. But thank you, Melissa, Allison, Faith, Jason, Eve, Matt, Justin, Carrie, and Chris. For myself, Cirroc Lofton, Aaron Eisenberg, and Pat Beverly, apparently. Thank you all very much for joining us. And until next time, always remember the seventh rule.